What's up guys, Tucker here from Electric Cycle Rider. Behind me is the new Talaria Sting. Our friends at Ebikezilla hooked us up with their pre-production model, so I've been out riding it a bunch and want to talk to you guys about it and show you what it does off-road on the trail and on the track. There's a bunch of great videos out there showing a lot of technical stuff, which I know I will cover a bit of that in this video and answer some of your questions, but this is more to go ride the bike and see how it does in the dirt where a lot of you are going to be riding it. So if you're keen on buying one of these from Ebikezilla, I've got a $50 off coupon code in the description, or find it through our marketplace at electriccyclerider.com/marketplace. Both places you'll have a coupon code that you can feel free to use if you're going to purchase it, save you a little bit of money. But yeah, in the meantime, let's do a walk around with the bike, talk about some of the updates and the differences from the Sur Ron, and then take it for a ride. All right, so here it is, the Talaria Sting. If you're a keen observer of the bike, you'll notice pretty quick that it has some upgrades to it that are not stock. So I'm going to point those out right away so there's no confusion here. This is a modified Talaria Sting. It has a Fox 40 front fork and a Fox X2 rear shock. The updates don't end there. It also has a 54 tooth sprocket, so that's a bigger sprocket than stock, and it's also got the GritShift riser stem on it that's going to bring the bars up 2 inches, as well as Dunlop MX53 tires. But yeah, there was a gentleman in the comments who was pretty upset with the fact that I am reviewing this bike with updated suspension. I'll just address that directly and say that this is the bike that I have to review right now. I will have a stock one here in about a month. I don't need to ride the stock Talaria Sting to tell you that the RST or DNM fork or the DNM rear shock are not my favorite. I apologize if you're upset with the fact that these are upgraded, but I can tell you right away when I get the stock Talaria Sting, one thing I'm going to tell you to do is, if you have the means, get rid of the fork and shock and get different ones, because the stock ones are not very good. That's where they save money on these bikes. All right, anyways, moving on. So where to begin with the updates on this Talaria Sting? I think aesthetically, you know, one of the bigger things that you're going to notice, let's start with the seat here and the battery box. So this is, it's got a bit more of a slope to it than the Sur Ron X, and the transition between the front of the seat and the battery box is a little less dramatic, which I'll tell you, when I'm riding it, I find that to be a bit of a benefit. I don't think it looks as cool, to be honest with you, but I do think that it feels a lot better when you're trying to scoot up on the seat in some corners and stuff. It doesn't feel as uncomfortable as the Sur Ron, so that's a bonus. The seat is a bit softer, more comfortable. One thing I do need to point out or reiterate is that this is a pre-production model, so there's some things that are going to change slightly on this bike, one of which being the subframe is going to be a little bit taller on the production model. So the kind of like seat angle is going to change a little bit. I'll talk about that when I get on the production model, but just let that be known that for those of you that are riding the production model, it might be a little bit different. Moving down a little bit, you'll see that the frame is a bit different design, and the frame is claimed to be stronger than the Sur Ron X. So moving down, you'll see the rear swing arm here is wider than a Sur Ron X, so that's one thing to keep in mind. I believe you'll be able to fit wider tires on there, or maybe not have to dish the rim as much if you're going for a bigger rear wheel. Can't quite say though, because I haven't done it yet, because most of the issue comes from rubbing against the chain. And so yes, you can fit bigger tires for sure in the swing arm area, but you're still probably going to run into that same issue with the knobbies running on the chain here when you go too wide on a tire. So that remains to be seen. We'll eventually do that, but there's a different bolt pattern, so you can't just swap over your Sur Ron wheels onto this bike, is what I'm told. The guys at GritShift are working on a adapter that will allow you to do that temporarily, but just a heads up, if you have a Sur Ron, you're buying a Talaria, and you've got updated wheels, the rear hub is different on the Talaria Sting, so just a forewarning there. The other thing too is we've got a different style linkage. It looks to be stronger. I can't really say one way or another, but just so you know, looking in there, that the linkage is different than a Sur Ron X. And I'm sure there'll be a bunch of aftermarket parts for that thing coming out here pretty soon too. But the biggest notable change which I'm sure you've all heard about, is this gearbox here. So the primary on a Sur Ron X is belt driven, and this is an actual gearbox. So I am psyched about the gearbox because, as you can see where I'm riding, it's dirty, sandy, rocky, and I'm always concerned about that belt catching debris and stuff like that. I know you can change it to a chain if you want to do that on a Sur Ron X, but to me, I think that's a huge benefit to this bike. All right, so now onto the motor. I haven't really taken the motor out or anything or looked at it. Output-wise, it's about the same. From my understanding, is the size is clearly, visibly a bit bigger than a Sur Ron X, and I am told that this is using some different sensors. It's not using Hall sensors. It's got some different cases and whatnot, but generally it looks a lot like a Sur Ron X motor, so can't quite say. I haven't had any problems with it. Seems to be running just fine. So moving on to the battery, which I think is a pretty big deal here. So where to start with this guy? One main thing you're going to notice as soon as you open the battery compartment is this connection here is far superior, in my opinion, than the Sur Ron X. It's just uses one connector here. It's a lot more burly and a better design. It's easier to use. It's more secure, so I like that. You kind of push this thing down, pinch it in. You can see what I'm doing there, and then pull that guy off. So that's what the connector looks like, and the port here on the battery it just looks way more solid. And the battery itself, it's kind of hard to see in the sun here, but better design, easier to read the power on this battery. It's got a nicer handle, and let's pull it out of this bike and show you what it looks like. So capacity wise, this is a 38 amp hour battery, 60 volt, 38 amp hour compared to the 32 amp hour of a Sur Ron X. So you're getting a little bit more capacity there, and the design is pretty similar aside from the fact that it's got a better handle, better connectors, and same with the charger port here. I like that this has a twist off, like that locking mechanism that keeps the cover on there, because the Sur Ron batteries is just this rubber grommet. Mine would never stay in, no matter, I've owned several of the bikes and none of them ever stay in there. So that's a nice feature, this little twisting locking mechanism on here. What else? Oh yeah, so inside the bike, you'll see right here, there is this lever where if you put weight on this part, you'll see that lever move forward. So that is intended to keep the battery in place. I will be honest with you guys, you're going to hear this battery rattling around in this bike a bit because, like I said, it's a pre-production model. That has been fixed on the production model, but just so you know, that is intended to keep the battery in a better position in the bike and not rattle around. So I think that's a pretty cool little design there. Pop this guy back in. Latch, pretty similar. Wish that had been updated, but you know. Pegs are the same. I like to call these things butter knives because they're pretty dull and pretty narrow. So Flow has a great option. If you want to upgrade those pegs, I would recommend that. Bars are about the same. Headlights the same. I don't know, guys. Want to go ride this thing? I do. Tired of talking about it. Let's go ride. So yeah, same deal. Ignition, turn that on. What's different here, you've got your egg rider display. It's flashing this weight here. So what you need to do to then ride the bike is press the start button. Brap, 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 brap. Yeah, so anyways, it flashes ready and then whatever mode you're in. So right now I'm in sport. If you wanted to switch out of that, you would just click M, and then you can see it's flashing Eco now. So Eco, keep it in sport. You got your miles per hour here, battery percentage, 100%. And then if you can kind of see in that bottom corner, those are your regen modes. I've got it in 3 right now. The highest is 4, so that's going to give you the most regen. So it's going to be the most engine braking. And then obviously goes down to 1. So I'll run through those different modes probably later in the ride here. But for now, I'm going to run it. Usually run it between like 2 and 3. And I think 4 is pretty strong. So I'm going to keep it in 3 for right now. Ready to roll now. What else? I don't know. Twist some throttle. Let's go. All right, so yeah. Bike is super snappy, light. These whoops are always challenging on these super light bikes. Kind of have to pump through them. And the Talaria is no exception. It is heavier, weighs roughly 150 pounds, so yeah, quite a bit heavier than a Sur Ron, but man, I can't really tell. Like, yeah, it feels a little heavier. Got the throttle wide open here, fully pinned, hitting these whoops. Gotta kind of time these perfect. Oh my God. Oh, that's a workout. Jump on some single track here. Yeah, like I was saying, this bike has Fox suspension on it, so yeah, some pretty expensive stuff that works way better than stock. So chassis wise, I've ridden pretty much all the different configurations. God, these are deep. On the Sur Ron X, so this bike is no exception. The Fox stuff works really great. And yeah, it cooperates a lot like a Sur Ron X with the Fox equipment, which is, on this type of trail, getting tossed around like crazy. You've seen my head-to-head videos out here at Croom with bikes like the KTM. Sur Ron takes a little bit of a beating out here. Oh, scraping pegs there. All right, so I've been running in mode 3 for the regen. I'm gonna switch it down to 2 because this sand stuff, like, it's nice to roll through this. So yeah, anyways, switching to 2 on the regen. Where's the trail go here? There it goes. I was about to say something, now I'm distracted. So one thing I forgot to mention in the beginning is that the ergonomics of this bike are a little different than the Sur Ron as well. This bike has actually got more ground clearance and a taller seat height by roughly 2 inches than a Sur Ron X. So yeah, I think that's a pro, personally, to have the higher seat height. I think it makes the bike feel bigger, which is a welcomed update. By the way, if you're hearing any rattling, yep, that's the battery. No, that's not what the stock bike is going to sound like. This bike is a pre-production and there were some changes made. So, just a heads up. And this is like really loose sand, you probably can't tell on the GoPro. Everything looks flat. But this is whooped out and super sandy. Whew. And yeah, I like regen 2 in this. I was running it in 3, but it's a little too much engine braking in the sand for me. Makes the bike feel a little sluggish, but how great is that you can just change the regen on the display? I think that's super awesome for the Talaria Sting. Let's talk about power. yes, going to reiterate. Oh my God. All right, yeah, let's talk about power. Going to reiterate, this has a 54 tooth sprocket, which is bigger, which means more acceleration, probably slightly less top end speed. And yeah, I mean, you feel it. Like, you can tell though, it's like partially sprocket. A lot of you guys are running these 54 tooths on your Sur Rons, which I think is a good idea, especially for tighter stuff. Just gives you more acceleration out of corners and stuff. But sprocket aside, yeah, I can feel the power delivery is a little different. It's like pretty snappy off crack of the throttle. I would like to ride a stock Sur Ron X back to back to know for sure, and I will do that, but yeah, it feels, oh God, oh, the crack of the throttle feels a little bit more sharp compared to a Sur Ron, and then the bike falls off quicker. So more acceleration, seemingly like 10, 15 miles an hour, which is good, but then it falls on its face a little bit. So the power map on this, I'm not sure if I like it more or less than a Sur Ron. It's definitely a bit different, and brings me to my next point, that currently, as I'm recording this, there aren't any power upgrades in terms of controllers and batteries for this bike yet, but you know they're coming. You know they're working on them. So there will be a point here in the near future where that comment is irrelevant. So brakes, yeah. If these were Sur Ron brakes, I wouldn't be able to tell. They feel identical. If there's any differences, they're minute and not really worth addressing, so might look a little different, but yeah, they feel pretty much exactly the same. So the bike comes with 19-inch wheels, front and rear, just like the Sur Ron. I believe the rear is a 1.6 instead of the 1.4 that you get on a Sur Ron. They definitely keep the bike light, which you can't argue with that. It's kind of the name of the game for these things, but just remember that these Talarias are using a different rear hub than the Sur Ron. So, like I said earlier, GritShift makes an adapter, and I'm sure everybody will have some options here pretty soon for 16 and 19 combos, or if you like running the 21, 18, that as well. All right, let's talk about the gear. Oh my God, I just scraped my pegs on that. Whoop every single time. Yeah, let's talk about the gearbox on this Talaria Sting, because I feel like that's a huge talking point for this bike. One of the bigger changes from a Sur Ron. In theory, it's going to be better for us off-road riders because you are not having to deal with the belt on the primary, which I have noticed. I've never had one break on me, I'll say that loud and clear. Don't want that to be misinterpreted. I've been worried about it, for sure. You start riding in like wet sand or mud or anything with like small pebbles and debris. There is always some concern with that failing. and you kind of remove that out of the equation with the gearbox. The one thing with the gearbox is, yes, you need to maintain it more. Bike now requires an oil change, which to me isn't that big of a deal. It's after break-in, which is 300 kilometers, you have to change the oil, and then after that, it's every 1,000 kilometers. So, I mean, it's really not a big deal at all. It's quieter for sure. All right, so let's talk about range a little bit. I've said this many a time, but it's all speculative. Rider weight, riding terrain, rider style, like how often are you rolling corners versus slamming on your brakes and grabbing a handful of throttle. All that stuff matters, and I will reveal what type of mileage I'm getting towards the end of the video, both in terrain like this and on the track at Spider MX. Probably a good time. Let's switch on over and hop on the Spider MX indoor mini track. All right, guys, this is the pit bike track here at Spider MX. Pretty fun place for the Talaria Sur Ron or Segway. Two reasons I wanted to ride here for the review. One of which being to put the bike in an environment that I think it really shines, which is tight, pit bike style tracks. They're light, they're snappy, they don't have a high top speed, they don't have suspension that's built to hit massive jumps or anything. So I think these types of tracks or trails that are like this are perfect for these Talarias and Sur Rons and Segways. All right, so the other reason I wanted to come out here and do a little bit of this review at Spider MX is to put the bike in a different environment for a battery range test. Sometimes Croom is not the best place for that, and this terrain's really different, so I just want to do like a comparison there. So I've ridden here a few times now and tested it. 100% battery down to 10%, where the bike loses a massive amount of power. I have gotten consistently 19 miles on this terrain, riding the way that I'm riding right now. And one thing to notice, this is the same on the Sur Ron as well, but yeah, once you get under a certain battery percentage, once the bike gets kind of hot, it loses power. And so that's something to be aware of, like, especially once you get under 50% battery, it gets pretty noticeable. Like right now, I'm under 50%. Bike is not as powerful as it was when I started. And just something to be aware of. The best meat of the power on these bikes is 100% to 50%. And it diminishes from there. All right, with all that out of the way, let's go back to Croom and finish this review. So I'll obviously do a full ride out here. We'll get some battery range numbers. But right now, I just looked down and I've gone 10 miles. Can you guess what battery percentage I'm at? Don't know if you're right or wrong, but it's 47%. So slightly under half, 10 miles, which seems to be on par with the Sur Ron. No big differences so far. All right, guys, back here at Croom. I'm going to wrap up for you trail riders out there. let you know what the range was, and just kind of a overall breakdown of my final thoughts of the Talaria Sting. Let's start with the mileage on it. So I'm down to 10% battery now, and I know that I mentioned it earlier on, but when this bike reaches 10%, I mean, it is painfully slow. Long story short, 100% down to 10% in this type of condition. I went 17 miles. So really, that's pretty on par with the Sur Ron and Segways that I've tested that are in stock form before. It's really not that far off at all. It's not better. It's not really worse. I'm usually in that like 18-mile range. It's probably like 75 or 80 degrees right now, so that plays a factor too. I know the bike's getting hot because I'm running at full throttle a lot, and so bike's working hard, and so you deplete the battery really quick that way. If you're not super hard on the throttle and are riding like more mellow type single track stuff, yeah, you're going to see better range than this. But yeah, I mean, it's nothing shocking to me. It's pretty similar to everything that I've seen on a Sur Ron X. It's impossible not to compare this thing to the Sur Ron. I've been doing it this whole video, but it's just like the bikes are so similar. You know, some folks from Sur Ron developed this Talaria, so generally, yes, these bikes are super similar. Specifically, there are some nuances that make the bike feel a little bit different. I was expecting the bike to honestly get a little bit more range just because of the bigger 38 amp hour battery, but hey, I mean, it didn't, you know. I'll try it again. I've run about 6 battery cycles on this thing already, and I'm getting about the same numbers every time. So yeah, down to try it on a different bike as well, but really the numbers aren't that much different. Another big difference is this gearbox here. The bike is a lot quieter. I noticed that for sure. When I usually ride out here with the Sur Ron, I get a lot of sand and debris in that primary belt area, and so it starts squeaking quite a bit. This bike doesn't do that with the gearbox. The frame is a little bit different. The bike sits a little bit taller, and like really, like those are some pretty big benefits. They're small nuances. It doesn't make the bike feel crazy different, but it's different enough where it's more in the direction of where a lot of us wanted this bike to go in the first place, which is to make it feel a little bit bigger. And this bike, yeah, it does feel a little bit bigger. All right, so let's get down to brass tacks here. The $1,000,000 question is, should you buy a Sur Ron or should you buy a Talaria? And the answer is not that simple. I would say if you already own a Sur Ron X, no, there's no reason to rush out and buy a Talaria. If you are keen on modifying your Sur Ron in the department of battery and controller, and you want to do that very soon, then yes, you should buy a Sur Ron because those options are currently available for that bike. They are not currently available for the Talaria. I know it's coming soon. I don't know when, but if you want to do that immediately, it's something to keep in mind that you can't really do that with this bike. Now, that being said, if your plan is to just kind of, you know, change the suspension or the sprocket, keep the bike relatively stock, you know, the tip of the hat kind of goes towards the Talaria. I like having the gearbox. The ergonomics are a big deal to me. I really like that the bike is bigger, and I think that's, you know, those alone are enough to make me want to swap over. But then like the little fit and finish deals with the battery connector and the charger are nice upgrades. The fork and shock are pretty moot points because you can get those both on the Talaria and the Sur Ron. I think the display is better on the Talaria. Both great bikes, both great deals, you know, good bargains. Once again, you can get $50 off at Ebikezilla if you use the code in the description, and save you a little bit of money there. Anyways, if I did not answer your specific questions in this video, I will do a separate video where I directly answer your specific questions in the Q&A department there. So fear not, I will get on that. But in the meantime, hopefully this helps point you in a direction or just gives you something fun to watch. So thanks for watching, guys, and take it easy.